Reptilian Reconnaissance Summary: The Moon, Mars, and Antarctica. When I was being taken around the Sol system by the Mayans and Anshar, we visited the Moon, Ceres, Mars, Super Federation bases around Jupiter and Mars, and finished with Antarctica. For the purposes of this summary, I'm going to share what was gleaned about the reptilians and slightly condense the information we observed from their bases/cities on the Moon, Mars, and the Antarctic. The activities at all three reptilian locations were very similar. On this particular mission, we had one of our cosmic cousins attend. Micah from the closest inhabited star system in our local stellar neighborhood was there to witness the mission and share his people's struggle to liberate their solar system. I will not touch on that in this report, but will cover what we learned of the plight of Micah's people. Micah was very emotional when observing this mission, as it has not been that long since his people were in a similar position. The reptilians had relatively small bases on the Moon and Mars when compared to their large city in Antarctica. There were two main bases on the Moon that were very close together, could be considered as base complex, and one base on Mars that was a military outpost. The bases on the Moon and Antarctica had very similar activities and functions. There were two cloaked satellites, ancient in age, that are in orbit around the Earth that are a part of the reptilian mind and mood control projects. In one of the Moon facilities, the reptilians have a device that is connected to their satellites and the control center in Antarctica that they guard with their strongest psychic soldier castes. One of the main projects the reptilians has was to use satellite technology to control the minds and moods of humanity, using it to generate strife and war while keeping the population docile and less able to resist the power structure on Earth that they control. This program allows them to generate louche energy on the planet for them and their AI god to consume on a mass level. When viewing the reptilian city under Antarctica, we observed a horrific sight. I didn't get a number, but what appeared as millions of reptilians were deep under the ground in a city carved out of caverns. There was a portion of the city that had very high-tech equipment and devices that were being actively and jointly worked on by reptilians, biodroids, more on them later, and humans. Further down in the cavern is where we found the other castes of the reptilian society. The look of this area could be described as Spartan and low-tech. It felt like an old Celtic castle with the red, black, purple, and maroon tapestries hanging over large doorways and statues placed in passageways. There was a lot of death-themed art on the walls that looked like it was painted or tattooed on what looked like skin from the backs and chests of humans and other beings they have encountered. I was told that each gruesome piece of art told the story of a battle or conflict. The statues were made of a mixture of some sort of plaster partially covering mummified bodies of both reptilians, ancient humans, and what appeared to be pre-Adamites. I was told by Micah that these pieces of art were commissioned at different times in our history after the reptilians had won victories over humans and pre-Adamites and other castes, and the leaders of their enemies were preserved in these statues. Micah stated that his people had discovered very similar facilities on their own planet after they liberated themselves, more on how they did this in the future. Many of the statues were said to have been created to celebrate victories over the pre-Adamites and humans going back over 50,000 years, with the most recent statues being from a few thousand years after the last solar event, 11,800 years ago. The command and control area is where they stay in contact and coordinate with their ET allies, ships, and various projects and missions. We witnessed a quick high-tech Zoom call between the reptilians, insectoids, and tall greys that showed that these groups coordinate. I saw a symbol pop up just before the communication began that was floating in a holographic field that was a black triangle with a circle of what looked like a bent light beam around it. The technology in this area is very advanced, and only a certain caste of their society is allowed access to it. We didn't focus too much on this area and one other area due to royal white reptilians being present. They would have detected our presence and reconnaissance mission very quickly and easily. We then viewed one of the less technical areas of this city and found hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of reptilians in some sort of hibernation state. This was a different class of reptilians, and they were shorter and less muscular but had larger heads similar to the pre-Adamites. They would go into a deep hibernation while leaving their bodies as very tall shadow figures. Each reptilian shadow figure had between 3 and 8 shadow beings with them and were obviously controlling them. They were then projecting themselves into human military facilities, workplaces, homes, and even dreams, where they were stationing the shadow beings to influence and torture the people present. They were collecting louche but also affecting the vibration and state of consciousness of the people. They were able to influence many people while being able to completely control or possess many others. Some of this hibernating group had what looked like some sort of witch doctor class wearing cloaks who were standing among the hibernating reptilians and performing what looked like black magic ceremonies. In some cases, they were sacrificing humans while watching holographic projections of other humans on the surface doing a mirrored ceremony where they were also sacrificing a human. The sacrifices occurred at exactly the same time, opening a portal between the two locations. The cloaked witch doctor type of reptilians would walk through this portal and appear physically before the humans, who would drop immediately to their knees in worship. What we witnessed was beyond horrific and sticks with me to this very day. Because of these activities, this city was infested with what we would call lower, mid to high-level demons and negative polarity elementals. These demons were obviously visible to the reptilians as they were interacting with them, and in some cases ordering them to attach to certain humans or groups and follow their very specific orders to create chaos, sickness, mental distress, and death in their targets. In each of the reptilian bases there were areas where humans were kept. Some of them were the Dark Fleet operators who had to flee the programs after 𝐒𝐚𝐬 exposed their program. They were now refugees in these bases and were assisting the reptilians by doing all of the manual labor and taking care of prisoners who were mostly there to be sacrificed or as food sources. I would imagine these Dark Fleet operators are pretty concerned about what will happen to them if the reptilians run out of their human slaves that are delivered by the thousands by organized crime groups that kidnap people on the surface for this purpose. We also observed strange sort of human-looking bio-androids. The 𝐒𝐚𝐬𝐬 and 𝐒𝐿 explained that these bio-machines are millions of years old, if not older. They were the result of the AI god taking over another solar system, and these androids were built in the image of the civilization that had designed them. The AI took over these androids and used them and the technology of this civilization against them and wiped out every living soul in that solar system. These droids carried a certain type of AI programming that make them very useful, and these bio-droids are what design and build most of their technology. They are basically AI avatars that allow the AI god to produce technologies that the reptilians are not capable of producing. We also observed hundreds of 8-foot-tall beings that looked very human. They were very muscular and had 6 fingers on each hand. They were a race that had been defeated by the reptilians and AI and was now in service to the AI god. There wasn't a whole lot of who they used to be left, as they were mind-controlled and infested with nanites, the same type the reptilians have inside of them. These beings had their own spacecraft that they operated alongside the Draco, and are the ones that abduct and experiment on humans for the reptilians in a program shared by a few ET groups. At this point in our reconnaissance mission, we were detected by one of the witch doctor reptilians and had to move to our next location in Antarctica, which were ICC and former Dark Fleet facilities that were very active and working closely with their counterparts in 3 different bases on the Moon. We were very upset and disturbed by what we witnessed, and the next time the Mayan/𝐻𝐚 delegation picked us all up, we were worried about what we would encounter next. Thankfully, we were able to receive quite a bit of hope when we traveled to the Super Federation bases and were told about a major meeting coming up with the new Guardians that will discuss the Super Federation's mandate to perform legal investigations and hold violators of cosmic law accountable at the appropriate time. Part of what the 𝐻𝐚/Mayan delegation was doing was bringing the appropriate human witnesses along while they gathered evidence for these future cosmic trials. We were told these trials would occur after the solar event and humanity had chosen the direction for their civilization for the first time in their history. We observed some very troubling things, yet were left with a tremendous amount of hope for the future of humanity and its new chapter of self-determination.